Well, here we are once again. It is Sunday night, and this is Sunday Night AstroLive. Thank you for being here. Had some issues with the computer tonight. I was messing around with the power, and the power went out, so I had to reconfigure some things. But here we are, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. And we're going to get into it tonight. It's going to be a bit of a follow-up from Friday's show. And what's really interesting is if you didn't follow Friday's show, let me see if I can pull it up here on the old channel so you can see it. I'm not going to play the whole thing, obviously, but let me show you the thumbnail. And that way, you guys can sort of get this theme here that I'm going to be laying on you. So this was the theme for Friday's show, right? It was Welcome to the New Tyranny. And this is a continuation of Friday's show with some astrology behind it to give you a sense as to what we're dealing with in terms of energies that are really unparalleled in a lot of ways. So what I'm going to do here is you're going to go back in time, connect some of the dots from Friday, and then bring it forward and build the astrological sort of evidence, I suppose, to back everything up so that I sound credible and not the rantings and ravings of a madman. But that's okay, because if you find it rational and reasonable and something that you can wrap your head around, well, I guess that says a lot about us and our particular brand of sanity, that we all kind of agree on the fact that things are rapidly headed towards some degree of full tilt. Now, I'm going to be kind of upfront and fair here. And what I'm going to try to get across to people is that I'm not here to dump on America. I'm not here to dump on humanity. I'm not here to make your Sunday night a dark and desultory place that you want to just click off and say, I've had it. Can't I have some, good times or good feelings or good expressions? Can't we be positive about the world for a change? I'm going to leave some space for that, right? But you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait to get to the positive part, because we're going to have to get through a bit of the muck and the mire of the perhaps not so positive. And what we try to do around here is give you a sense, and this has always been kind of the backbone of any of the shows that we do, whether it's with somebody like Russ on Fridays or any number of my Friday guests like Danny, or when I do 15 Minutes of Flame, And when we get into the astrological world, what we're trying to excavate here is a pattern recognized map into the future. That's part of what's happening, is we're using certain patterns, whether they're historical patterns, astrological patterns, or a combination of both. That's what we're doing. And so we're literally gazing into a possible future. Now, if that possible future is bright and shiny and paradisical and all the other things that go along with it line up, hey, I'm right there. I'm on the first chorus or the first stanza of Kumbaya, right? So a lot of this also has to do with what's out there, meaning what are these cycles that we're in and how they affected us, and how much social programming and social engineering goes on in our world in ways that we're not even really aware of. And so tonight's show is going to tackle part of that. And we're going to begin to look at a period of time, which again goes back to Friday. I'll throw up some visuals, and you guys will get what I'm talking about. Now, what's really interesting is what's his name? Sam Tripoli was on Joe Rogan, I believe, just yesterday, and he basically said the same thing that I was saying on Friday, with a bit of a different emphasis. Like, he had a few other things that he was talking about that I wasn't really including, although clearly his subject matter is adjacent to it. But I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Somebody else is having these thoughts at the same time. And by using astrology and looking at astrology, we're going to be able to bring another layer to potentially where this is going, which I think if we really bear down, right, if we really, really bear down on who the players are, who's in place, what's in place, how we've been conditioned, I think we'll be able to make enough connections here to go, oh, yeah, this is a possible reality. And then the daunting question becomes, what do we do with it? Now that we know that this is possible, how do we live our lives moving forward? That's another question. I don't know if I have I don't know if I have all the answers, right? But it feels to me like, just in general, we're not quite at the turning point yet. You say, well, we're at this turning point. We're not quite there yet. For me, the turning point is when everything all starts to happen at once. And I mean everything at once. Like, there's going to be change in how we buy, sell, barter, exchange. Usually buy, sell. There's going to be a change. There's going to be a major paradigm shift across that entire platform that will also coincide with, more than likely, different layers of governance. And at the same time, there's also going to be an infusion of technology that is going to be kind of heavy for some people to wrap their heads around. And we're gonna get into why. All right, so once again, thank you all for being here, and I hope at the end of the night you understand why I'm doing the show. And it's not because I want to be a Debbie Downer, because there are some interesting things happening. And we'll get into those things, I promise. But we have to start addressing some of the elephants in the room. Okay, so in order to understand where we are, theoretically, the height of Rome was around 117 AD. That was a long time ago, right? 117 AD. And this was this is it, right? Jesus had died, and they're kicking ass. The Romans are kicking ass. This is interesting. So in 11780 in Rome, the Jewish diaspora revolt is quelled, likely by autumn 117, though unrest may have persisted in Egypt until early 118. Its suppression results in the near complete expulsion of Jews from Cyrenaica, Cyprus, and several regions of Egypt. And this is when they begin the construction of the Pantheon, and by 117, the actual territory of Rome is at its greatest, right? It reaches its greatest extent. So this is the height. But what's interesting is this Jewish diaspora revolt, and it results in the near complete expulsion of Jews from Cyrenaica, Cyprus, and several regions of Egypt. Okay, why is that important? Well, I don't think that the U.S. currently is at the height of Rome stage. I think we peaked. Like we're not there yet. We were there, but I think we peak right around Reagan. By the way, Reagan, if you are not aware of it, Reagan was a socialist. Ronnie was a full-on socialist, and when he became president, everything that Reagan did was about internationalism and globalism. He set the American public back significantly. One of the things that he did was he basically gave all the pharmaceutical companies a pass. So if you had a new vaccine and hey, didn't really work out the way you thought it would, you were exempt because you were doing something for science and the betterment of humanity. So once that happened, the vaccine schedule started to accelerate rapidly. So prior to 1984, I think, what were there, 5 vaccines on the schedule? By the time you get to the 90s, you're like, 15 deep, something like that, right? Like, so that's one thing that Reagan does. The other thing he does is he makes the economy so much better for the extreme wealthy. Now, you could say, hey, it's a free market economy. If you're gonna go for it, go for it. It's the American dream, etc. Right? But we're sold on this idea of supply side economics. And so at the same time, we're also getting hit with Reagan giving amnesty to all these workers from the South, Mexico, El Salvador, etc. Right? So you have this convergence now. People are saying, "Hey, you can go to America and you're not going to get punished." And at the same time, you have Reagan and his cronies paying less taxes and then being able to theoretically build out more businesses, but who are they employing? They're not employing the sons and daughters of America, right? They're employing these people that Reagan is kind of rubber stamped, right? So there are these things that are happening during Reagan. And then the biggest pieces around gun control really start to come in. If Reagan had not been connected to the fall of the wall, his presidency, I think, would appear very, very different than we might be able to look at it now, right? So Reagan is really, for me, like the Rome, like it is the peak of America's Rome with Reagan. It's so powerful that we defeat our ultimate enemy, the Soviet Union, right? Reagan is an Aquarian. That's his sign. And his role is he's a disruptor, right? But he's also kind of a one-worlder. And so there are treaties along the way that Reagan signs up for that consistently puts him in this sort of one world category, right? So Reagan is interesting in that regard. It's going to be, it'll be fascinating to see how Pluto, let's take a look at Ronnie. It'll be fascinating to see what Pluto does to Reagan's legacy. You know, he's one of these guys that's nearly untouchable, right? There's not a pundit or a president that doesn't sing the praises of fucking Ronald Reagan, right? So let's just take a quick look at him here. Right there, give you a visual. There you go. There's old Ron. Now, apparently, Trump loves Reagan, and I don't know. They had some kind of relationship. Who knows? Who knows what they had? But Reagan he's the guy that's the head of the third turning, right? That's where we are. We're at the third turning. America during the third, it's like the fall. It's like the fall. When I say fall, FAALL, like the autumn. And they are picking the fruits, whatever fruits are left on the tree, right? This is part of the third turning. All of that starts under Jimmy Carter when they begin to change the laws for the savings and loans, and they deregulate savings and loans. And that's when you have these big problems with like Glendale Federal Savings and Loan and people like John McCain. I'll tell you who was kind of involved in that banking world with Reagan and George H.W. Bush is Tucker Carlson's father. Tucker Carlson gets in with Reagan and Bush 1 through the world of finance, right? So anyway, Reagan, he's the Aquarian. He's going to come in and he's going to, in a very interesting way, kind of level the playing field for Europe. Right? Like there is no European Union without Ronald Reagan. Because the Soviets are in a deconstruction, disassembly mode. And then, these countries have their freedom for a brief period of time, really, maybe about a decade. And they're already headed towards the EU. We've done the EU chart and everything. But there is no EU without Ronald Reagan. And of course, Reagan is an Aquarian. And when you get into a group like the EU, what is that? It is an Aquarian unit. It's a union. It's not even an assemblage of states, right? It's something different unto itself. So, of course, it would be an Aquarian who would set up a group of states that would be yoked together under one currency, one series of nationalized transactions. What I mean by that is that if you're doing business in Italy and then you're doing business in Spain or Poland, who's a member of the EU, there was a time where you had all these VAT taxes and it was different for each country. And in a lot of ways, it created a lot more paperwork in order to get business done. But this is the theoretical plus side of having the EU. Everything gets standardized. But when it gets standardized, that means that there are certain countries that are doing better than others, and they're kind of pulled down because part of their GDP winds up being redistributed through other parts. It's complex, but it is a group, right? It's not France, it's not Germany. It's all of them combined. And it's an Aquarian, Ronald Reagan, who's the one that initiates all of it, right? And it's through the fall of the wall, the fall of the theoretical Soviet Union. But that's where, we are peak Rome right around that time. So if you go back to 1984, let's go back to 80. That's when Reagan gets elected, right? Let's take a quick glimpse at 1980. And I'll show you guys where the planets were. And this is really sort of in a lot of ways, the height of everything. So let's go to 1980 right there. We're going to go to Valentine's Day on 1980 because we're going to change this because we're going to use Valentine's Day as another marker here soon. All right, so let's take a look at some of the outer planets. For me, if you want to make a story about peak America, in a lot of ways, it is from 1980 to 1984. And I'll just show you. So here we go, 1980. We're in Gen X territory, right? Right there, Pluto, 21, Libra. Boom. So this is right after Reagan gets elected. I think this is just shortly before he gets shot, to be honest with you. But this is where we are with peak America. Uranus is in Scorpio, and it's exalted in Scorpio. Neptune is in Sagittarius, and it is exalted in Sagittarius. So we have two outer planets that are in exaltation. And you can kind of feel that in the air at that time. There's all kinds of innovation going on in the computer world. And this is an interesting time spiritually with Neptune and Sagittarius. So the decade, the 70s start off with Neptune. It's a 15-year round, right? So the 70s start off with Neptune and Sag, and they're crazy. There's all these crazy, whacked out, far out religions. Most of them are in California. There's gurus galore, right? Neptune and Sag was sort of the the time where even Jesus was popular. You had Jesus Is Just All Right with Me by the Doobie Brothers. You had Jesus Christ Superstar, Andrew Lloyd Webber. I mean, these are all manifestations of Neptune in Pisces. Things like Tibetan Buddhism, the Naropa Institute, all this stuff becomes very, very popular around this time. And America becomes this hotbed of like spiritual awakening. And it all starts kind of in that sloppy early 70s. But by the time you get to the 80s, like, you're starting to, channels are starting to really come on, like Jay-Z Night. And like, I think the first time I saw her was in the early 80s. Anyway, the outer planets are cooking. They're in a really good place. You've got Saturn here for 3 years in Virgo, right? So go back to 1977, Saturn goes into Virgo. And so the United States has a Virgo midheaven, right? So just imagine this being the US midheaven and Saturn coming around here, and it's literally making a turn, right? It's making this turn. It had been in the US ninth house. Jimmy Carter did this thing with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, right? The Bagel Accords. It's like that was happening, all Saturn, ninth house. But we were also undergoing some real strife with Saturn in the ninth house, weren't we? That was when the hostages were taken in Iran. You have this thing with the Shah. That's all very Saturn ninth housing. But by the time Reagan comes around and gets elected, Saturn's on the basically on the U.S. midheaven, conjuncting. Guess what? Neptune. So let me see if I can do this for you guys, so you can see kind of a Saturn Neptune effect here. All right, hold on. All right, so let's do this. We go to USA, USA, USA. Have you ever been in a crowd where you started to shout that? USA, USA. I've never done that. I don't know. Maybe it'd be really cathartic for me to do it. Would you guys think it would be cathartic for you just to lose yourself in the chant of the crowd? And you could look out the room, USA, USA. Slap 10 in East Berlin. Okay, so we're going to look at this, and I'll give you guys a look-see. Where are we? No, that's not what we want. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Quick little fix. Easy fix. Right. Okay. So, yeah, I'm correct. Not that I'm trying to be, but here we have. So this is the US chart. Right there. And there's Saturn, our friend Saturn. What degree is Saturn? Well, Saturn's at 25. Virgo. Neptune, 22. Virgo. So by the time it's inauguration time for good old Ron, the troubles in Iran have vanished, right? It's like, okay, you're the president now, so you're good. That happened in November, right? So that probably put it somewhere over here. I don't know, maybe about 10 degrees Virgo, but still, nonetheless, like it went from being Carter's ninth house issue for the country. I mean, literally, the country was going through this Saturn ninth house issue, or people had been taken hostage, right? And there's all this animosity that was going on. And then Carter tries to free them. It doesn't work. And then magically, Reagan gets elected. They all get let go. And then, of course, run into the Iran-Contra thing. But this is what happens here, right? This sets the stage for literally a sea change. This is the U.S. chart, ladies and gentlemen. This is where Saturn was. Now, once we get past 1 degree Libra, Saturn is moving into the 10th house, right? And that is an auspicious transit for any chart. So let's move the timeline ahead, and let's just show you what that looks like. So let's go to 1981, just a mere 1 year later. And there's Saturn, right? So by the time we hit 80, 81, this is peak America. I mean, literally, this is peak America. You have Saturn, which is ruled by the 10th house, right? Is the ruler of the 10th house. It's there. Saturn is exalted in Libra, and America is getting to go through its Saturn return. Jupiter's here as well. It is at a peak, right? So for this 3-year period, this is the honeymoon of Reagan, 80 to 84, right? By the time 84 rolls around, this is when we get into the 11th house stuff, right? This is where we get into the Aquarianism and, you know, changing the world, defeating communism, right? Except in Reagan's eyes, it wasn't as if he was really defeating communism. What he was doing is he was, in his own way, creating a world order. Now, that world order, at least in Europe, would not surface for what? I mean, I remember getting money from a teller, like an ATM in France, I don't know, 2001, 2002. So it would still be over 20 years before that would happen. But nonetheless, Reagan sets the stage for all that. So we are at the peak here of, and this idea, right? This was really the idea that American enterprise, American capitalism, fairness, equality, like all those things that the American dream has shared with the world. Well, Mr. President, it knocked down that wall, right? You'll hear people say that. They firmly believe that. There's a lot of propaganda going on back then, and there were a lot of things that were taking place behind the scenes that not a lot of people know about. But you cannot doubt that this is really sort of this peak period of America, right? Now, that Saturn going through the 11th house is going to be the planet that's going to break up not for the U.S. The U.S. is sort of like the icebreaker in the North Atlantic, right here, with Saturn going through the 11th house in Scorpio and breaking up the forms of these other systems, right? And this is all part of it. This is America's basically peak 8 years right here. This is the U.S. chart. The U.S. chart. These are the transits that were happening February 15th, 1981. Now, by the time, let's put this in 1988, and we'll keep going. We'll keep moving forward. But I think this is good for historical context. It also gives you a sense as to, how astrology can work here. So, all right, what do we have? That 88. Then we got to go back a little bit. Let's do this. Let's do 84. All right. All right, so this is 84 right there. Saturn is in the US 11th house. Now you can also see at this time where, at least during this time, we still have Uranus has moved out of Scorpio. So that whole exalted period where all these electronics are just exploding, right? That part has already taken place. Here with Uranus and Sagittarius, they're looking at, well, where can we build this shit? Right? Where can we get the stuff that we figured out how to do? We could probably get some of it done in Renton, Washington, but ultimately in Sagittarius, they're looking abroad. And it's during this period of time where we're starting to move more into globalism. Like that started to happen even before that, like about a year or two before that. Jupiter in Sagittarius, Uranus in Sagittarius. The whole idea is now that, well, it's not quite there yet. There's going to be 4 more years. But by the time we roll into 1988, 89, and the fall of the wall, they're looking for new sources of manufacturing, right? Especially with Uranus, because they've just been R&Ding all this stuff, all this technical stuff, the magic of the 21st century. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll do 1988. So by this time, in 1988, we are now in George H.W. Bush territory, right? Reagan is winding down. This is his last year. And so the United States has been through a major kind of peak period here, right? Where we're literally changing the world, having the Saturn return to the country, and over here being able to dominate this group space. And then everything goes behind the scenes, and we're dealing with the Russians. Every time Saturn goes through Sagittarius in the US 12th house, we got something going on with the Russians. It's really amazing to, like, the same thing was happening 30 years before this, which would have been 1955. And that's sort of the end of Stalin, the beginning of Khrushchev taking a very aggressive role towards the United States, building out its relation with Cuba. Every time we go through this, even when we go back to like 2016, right? 2016, well, even before 2016, but 2016 is when Saturn begins to make its move into the U.S. Actually, it's 2015 because it's in Scorpio. But that's when we start to go through like sanctions with Russia, and there's the Russian Olympics, and everybody's bad mouthing Russia. Russia becomes the bad guy again, right? And it's actually during Obama's watch, right? Like towards the end. And it's uncanny. Anytime Saturn goes through the US 12th house, there's always some major change or upheaval or philosophical disagreement with Russia. It's happened all 3 of those Saturn transits. But by the time we get around here, we're moving in a whole new direction, right? So there's Mars, there's Uranus, there's Saturn. We're getting ready to tear down the wall. And what's fascinating is that is not even peak America. Peak America is happening back here. Peak America is right. It's right in the about a year and a half after, 2 years, 82. Like that's really peak America. So at this point in time, this is a wrecking ball, and eventually the Soviet Union is going to collapse. Right. So this is, but once this happens, right, if we just keep following this and continue to go around and around and around the chart, by the time we get into the mid 90s, Saturn has really gone into the nadir, right? So when we get into the mid 90s, like 96, 97, this is the beginning of like the fourth turning of America. Now, at that time, Clinton obviously is president, right? And we have this weird Saturn Neptune opposition going on. There seems to be a tremendous amount of corruption. There's a loss of leadership, right? There's all these things that were happening down here at this time that were not great. This is where the erosion of governance begins to take place right here. And the other thing too is that Neptune is incredibly deceptive, right? So things that were supposedly good for the country, like making China most favored nation trading status, ninth house, Virgo, oh, we're going to have so many more jobs. It's going to make everybody, a lot more wealthy. We're going to have way more Walmarts. And if we have more Walmarts, we'll be able to employ more people. They're getting high on Neptune. They're getting high on Neptune. Because down here with Saturn in the fourth house, they're sort of bottoming everything out. And by the way, this is the beginning of the housing stuff with Clinton and Glass-Steagall. Like they're starting to kind of grease the wheels for what's going to happen in the early 2000s, and it's all Saturn going, getting ready to go through that fourth. Now, this is further into the future, right? So this is like 96, 97, right around here. And we get that. So this is actually, if we're just cruising along, this is the nadir of America. Believe it or not, although Saturn's back again. So it's kind of in the same place, right? So if we're just looking at this from a personal chart, when you have Saturn going through your fourth house, some things happen. First of all, there's probably about a 90% chance you're going to move, right? It's like when I work with clients, like, all right, have you moved yet this year? No. Okay. Are you thinking about it? Yes. Okay. Well, you're going to do it. And it's just a matter of time and figuring out where that might be. So that's part of it. What's happening is when Saturn comes through here, right, it is like the Reaper. And what it's doing is it's excavating sort of where you've been, and you're putting down new roots. And this process is not a very easy one. This is not Saturn's house, right? This is a house that's ruled by Cancer. This is Saturn's house way up here. So if you look at this period basically between 96, 97, 98, right around, this is not a good period. for the United States. Remember, we've already reached peak America right here with Reagan. We're way on the other side of the mountain on this. Right, we're getting into the Clinton body count, Vince Foster. I mean, shit we've never seen before. The whole drug world, which had really taken off in the 80s, is just exploding. There's crack, from freebase to crack. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And the other thing, which is interesting too, you go back and you look at that time, like what was really big in America at that time? It was gangs. You remember all the gang movies that came out? There were Boys in the Hood, Colors, all New Jack City. You had all. It was like black exploitation films meet these gangster movies from like the 1940s. And the sad part is that a lot of that shit is real, right? And that's going through the fourth house, right? Saturn in the fourth house. And people are having to deal with more and more of this. And the weird thing about it is like, it was the whole crack thing was so insidious. It wasn't like somebody, put a gun to your chest and said, "Hey, motherfucker, in an alley, smoke this." It was really insidious. I had a friend. This guy was super bright. He taught at a community college. He had a side business with computers. Charles was a pretty successful guy in his own way. Really liked Charles. And he wound up teaching at a junior college in the East Bay. I'll skip the name of the college. And one of his students, after class, said, "Hey, man, do you want to smoke some crack?" And Charlie did it, right? He did it. He lost everything. And this was not a guy who was wild, crazy, running. And what he found out was once he got into that world, there were so many professionals that were also involved in, indulging in crack and losing their livelihoods, their families. But again, this is all, all the drug stuff. It's all Clinton world. It's all gang related. It's all Medellin cartel. And it's all here in the fourth house, right? It's all down here. And you can even see for a year, Jupiter's been down here and just, doing Jupiter things. What, 1980, 87, 88, doing Jupiter kinds of things. I mean, that's really, in a lot of ways, like the height of Mena, Arkansas and all that stuff. But gangs are really big. They're starting to take off. And so we're starting to get to this, a bit of this nadir, right? Now Saturn's here, but this is where we're going to get into Clinton territory. I'll even show you. So if we go here, we'll do 1990. Let's do 96. So, 97. And that's probably we can get by with 96. We just have to go further out to the year because we're starting with February. So let's go with 97. That gives us an extra year of Saturn. So there we go. So here we are. We're in the nadir of, at least at that time, right? We're in the nadir of the U.S. Saturn transit. And the whole idea here now is that in 14 years, when Saturn is going to be in Libra, that is supposed to be a major rebirth, right? Because it's starting down here. This is what happens. Saturn bottoms out your chart, right? And then this slow, inexorable rise of Saturn as it just goes through every single planet here in the US chart and eventually makes it to ding, 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 Saturn in Libra on the midheaven. That is the rebirth period, right? So you can basically go back to like 1968, which is when Saturn was in Aries, and we go all the way to 1981, 82, right? The election of Reagan. And this is sort of and what's fascinating is that Reagan does play a major role in the 60s in California, but he plays an even more major role up here. So we go from the nadir of the 60s, right? And we go all the way around, and now it's America's time. Now we are peaking. We're totally peaking. If we do the same thing with Clinton, well, guess who gets elected with Saturn when Saturn's in Libra? Barack Obama. Something happened along the way that shouldn't have happened. And I posit that thing that happened, probably two things. 92K, but also 911. 911 changes everything. And then we also have, remember, this is the beginning of the Glass-Steagall thing, right? Because you're going to get 4 years worth of Clinton. So that's going to be 88 to 92. And then another 4 years, which would be 92 to 96. No, so Clinton ran until 2000. So it was, so there was a year of Bush in there. So it was 96 to 2000 and then 92 to 94. And that's where all of the housing stuff gets set up. It's when Saturn is going through the US fourth house. And we all know who that turns out, right? But by the time that happens, and that plays a huge role, Obama's president. And that's Saturn in Libra. So theoretically, if we're playing the astrological game and we don't have Glass-Steagall, we don't have Y2K, and we don't have 9/11, we're in a different kind of a turning with Saturn in Libra because we've seen this before. We've seen this game before. Like this would be another rise of the Republic. But 9/11 happens over here. All these things happen. And so by the time Saturn finally makes this very awkward journey, right? It's an incredibly awkward journey. People are they're clamoring for Obama because in Libra, they're going to get equality, right? Oh, finally, we're exercising our right to vote for a Black president. Like that's really big Saturn in Libra energy. Very, very into it, right? Yeah, doesn't that feel good? It feels really, really good. It's like we're balancing things out. It's the great equalizer. Yeah, all that slavery stuff, that's behind us, man. Rear view mirror. We got ourselves a Black president, Black wife, Black children. We are with it now, right? Kumbaya. We shall overcome. Well, little did they know. In a normal chart, in a normal evolutionary process, this Saturn transit, I don't care what's over here, Saturn's going to work these planets. It's just the way it is. They're getting worked now. But Saturn working these planets eventually comes to the top of the chart. There's a purification, Saturn, Neptune, and then there it is. right? Saturn is exalted in Libra, and it's in its dignity in the 10th house. And this is something that this country has that is tremendous, right? But if you go down to the 4th house, what's it ruled by? It's ruled by Aries. And for me, Aries represents Rome. It's like this is, this, I guess if you want, you could play Project Paperclip or whatever. But, Aries and the homeland, it's like, oh, Americans are aggressive. They have guns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're actually very sensitive people with Chiron here. So there we go. We have Saturn back again in Aries, right? It's back down here in the 4th house. So if you go back and you look at these periods, these cycles, here we'll go to 1968, just to give you an idea. So we go to 68. See, you see Saturn right down here again. So what happens eventually goes around and around and around and around and around and around, and boom, Reagan gets elected. Right. And you could make a case that we are at the nadir or a nadir in 1968. That would not be that hard of a case to make. There's violence everywhere. We're in Vietnam. It's, you got heavy duty, racial tension stuff, right? You've got second wave feminism happening, violence on the streets of America, a war. I mean, this is, we went from a brief post-war Eisenhower idyllic world to all of a sudden dealing with the war halfway across the world, beamed into your living room every single night, not knowing who the enemy was or wasn't. I mean, all these crazy things that are happening, during 1968. It's also, you're dealing with like MK Ultra and the drug explosion. So a lot of Americans, I talked about this on Thursday's show when they have this thing called the Great Purge. And that's all happening here in 1968. We have shows like the Beverly Hillbillies and Petticoat Junction and Green Acres and the Wild Wild West and Bonanza and Gunsmoke and the Red Skelton Show, all these favorites. And the ratings were great. And they were selling all kinds of, Chuck Wagon, right? And then Brandon Tartikoff comes along. It's Fred Silverman. I always get the two of them mixed up. It's Freddie Silverman. He says, it's over. It's over. It's the Great Purge. So all these shows that are connected to this idea of America, they just go away, right? And that's all here again. 1968, like this Great Purge is starting to take place. They're redoing the foundation. Again, if you want to use the metaphor of the movie Dark City, it's a perfect metaphor. Anytime Saturn goes through the 4th house of the U.S., something changes at a fundamental level, deeply, and but you can't see it. You can't see it from where you're at because you're going through the changes. You're going through the intensity of Aries, which is, going through conflict and dealing with martial strife, right? Like it's a heavy place to have Aries in the U.S. chart. And then Saturn comes in there and Saturn can get real heavy. Now, remember, this is when we also have the Democratic Convention in 1968, and Richard Daley and his guys were cracking motherfucking skulls. Now, I don't know the exact date when Fred Hampton gets killed, but it's not too far off from that. So there's a lot of stuff going on the streets of America in the 60s. 68 specifically. It's quite heavy. But again, you follow this thing long enough, far enough, and eventually it leads you right to Reagan. right to Reagan, right at the top of the chart. Right? Boom, done. Then we go through it again. Right? We peak, we come down here. These are some of the Bush years. Not very good, especially with Saturn in the second house. And then it comes around again. And who are we dealing with? The Clintons. And all the Clinton bullshit. And everything that we just talked about, and then some. You got the Elian Gonzalez stuff. You've got Waco. You've got Richard Jewell. You got Ted Kaczynski. I mean, the Clinton years were nuts, man. They were totally fucking nuts. And again, people making a shit ton of money. And the beginnings of Glass-Steagall. And then here we go. Here's the inevitable rise. The only difference is that the inevitable rise brings us Obama. And that's where this whole thing completely changes channels, right? It just completely and utterly changes channels. And we've already gone over some of the reasoning. Very Libran, very Saturnian. Hey, look at us. We're really enlightened, right? We've reached, in some ways, that's true. I mean, that Saturn transit's like, reaching the pinnacle of, a civilized civilization, where you could probably, I don't know, pluck out a story about Michelle Obama's grandmammies somewhere in the South. And, all of a sudden she goes from the slave house to the White House. And I mean that metaphorically, not distinctly. I mean, so there's a story there to tell. It's just the wrong story, right? And it's by this time that they're starting to really get like the social engineering part of this thing down, because the internet's come along, and Obama's the first internet president. Now, the first most effective internet candidate was Ron Paul. And Ron Paul revolutionized raising campaign money. And Obama knew he was a shoo-in, but at the same time, he's able to use the internet. He's able to, reach and connect with people. So he's kind of the first internet president. But again, with that idea that he would have transparency, access, all the things that other presidents didn't always have, because they had 3 channels and PBS, right? So in some ways it works. In some ways it's this pinnacle, but it's almost like we've veered off into another version of the pinnacle. You know what I mean? So we're not at peak America. That's Reagan. That's like, taking the last bits of fruit and meat, off of the buffet table to take home with you. So by the time we get to Obama, right, we're already dealing with the Glass-Steagall stuff, and we should be peaking, but we're not, because we're dealing with some really heavy duty financial losses for a lot of people who got bamboozled. And it's kind of an amazing time in a lot of ways, especially for Obama. Saturn moves across Neptune. Like, who is this guy? Who is he? Where did he come from? And even Reagan, American presidents are kind of like that. When you think of Neptune, they're kind of like that. Like, Reagan was an actor, and that's like so Neptunian, isn't it? And then you have Trump, and Trump is really Neptunian as well. He's he's kind of slippery. He's got a reality show. He's got businesses that have 6 bankruptcies. I mean, he's very like, it's almost like a setup with Neptune going into the 10th house. And even Clinton, like, who the fuck is Clinton? He's some guy from, Hope, Arkansas, where his uncle was a pimp, his mother was a lady of ill repute, a madam. Like that's that's so Neptune. It's like our best and brightest are going to be people that are not who they claim to be, with Neptune up there. So, but the Obama thing should have resulted in this peak. But the problem with the Obama thing is that there's no fruit on the tree. There's no fat on the bone. It had all been taken away. It had all been just completely taken down to the bone by the real estate people, by not the real estate people, by the hedge funds. So it's a really weird time to be in America with Saturn on the midheaven. I mean, this is literally 2009, right here, 2009. But for all the promise and for all this feeling like, oh wow, we really elected the right guy, it doesn't go well, right? And we're back down. Anytime a planet, we'll use Saturn in this case, begins to descend, right? It begins to lose its power. It's at its peak. And 10th house, 11th house transits of Saturn are good. 12th house transits aren't that great, right? So here we go again. We're tracking Saturn, right? Right there. And let's change that. We're going to change the date on this. I mean, I think I already have it up here, but let me is this it? New. Here, we'll do this. Okay, so we're going to go 2026. And I think we had to do it in the evening, didn't we? That'll be close enough. All right, so this is February 15th, 2026. And then here we go. Here's Saturn and Neptune coming back around again, right? But I tried to get them as close as I could in terms of, let's see, we've got Saturn is at, where are we? 0, yeah, 0 Aries, Neptune, 0 Aries. So this brings us back to another one of these moments in time, right? Like Saturn and Neptune are already here. Like they're in there right now, but they're going to retrograde. And they go all the way back, at least Saturn does, to the U.S. Let's see. 417. Yeah, so what is that? The U.S. I won't go back that far. That's actually Aquarius, believe it or not. I know it's kind of funny, isn't it? But that's 26 Aquarius, 27, 27. So that's the American moon. So it would go to 25 Pisces, which puts it right there. Doesn't really do a ton, except for trine Mercury and Cancer. So, but again, we're at this new place, right? Every time we have Saturn going through the 4th house in the US chart, we are breaking down part of our living and domestic structure. So if you go back and you look at the period of time when Clinton was in office, they make China most favored nation trading status. They give Walmart all these tax deals. So they actually, it costs them a lot less to not only manufacture their goods overseas, but they go through these weird, like tax-free zones on these ships. So by the time they get to the US, they're not paying A lot of them, at least back in the day, they weren't, right? They figured this thing out. They gamed the system. And it was, this is when the globalists are really, man, they're just sharpening their knives. Hey, it's a free market. Let's have some fun with this, right? And it's interesting that it all really comes out of Arkansas, where Bill Clinton's president. You have Hillary Clinton, Madam X. You have Bill's Mafia, and you have Walmart. And then the chicken manufacturer, Tyson, which becomes huge during this time. So the rise of Walmart, which was already kind of happening, got just a massive boost with the Clintons as not just president and first lady, but also governor of the state of Arkansas. So their stories are very much tied together. But anyway, so now we have Saturn and Neptune here. And before, when we looked at this transit of Saturn and this kind of bottoming out, it didn't feel like we were bottoming out then, because there were a lot of people sort of at the top of the food chain during the Clintons that were making lots of money, but the job thing was really starting to change. It had begun to change even before that, but it's really, it's beginning to change. And the whole thing comes home to roost, unfortunately, when we deal with the Glass-Steagall stuff. Anyway, this is different than any of those other times, because now we have Neptune and we have Saturn both coming into the fourth house of the United States. And what we saw before was Saturn being like a metaphoric wrecking ball. Like, you have this sort of very deconstructive period that happens in the 60s. It's radical, it's Marxist, and 1968, by the time 1980 rolls around, you got Ronald Reagan as president, right? So there are these major forces that go through these changes. This Neptune-Saturn conjunction, for me, is how would I describe it without trying to freak you out? It feels very much like a Philip K. Dick novel. That's what it feels like. And remember, the fourth house is the home, right? We're talking about this country, U.S. And what's happening now and what will happen now, remember, Neptune is a 17-year journey here, right? 17 years. So let's say you're the ripe young age of 33 right now, sort of the prime of your life. You're a woman, you can still have beautiful baby children. If you're a dude, you've got your health, right? Like 33 is a good age. 17 years later, you're going to be 50. And that's a very different time. Very, very different time. Some of us, we may not even be around. Like, if you're in your 70s, I mean, a lot of you take good care of yourselves. So, what, a 15-year transit wouldn't be that brutal, right? Maybe 85. But I'm telling you, this Neptune transit of the fourth house in the U.S. chart is not going to be easy. Remember, we've had Saturn come through here. We've had to deal, with certain types of hardships, power grabs, sort of the reshuffling of the deck, right? Creating a new foundation so that 14 and a half years later, we're coming out on top with new leadership, generally speaking, better, not always though. But this is going to be a very, very, very different time. One of the things that is really grabbing my attention here with Saturn, with Neptune going into the fourth. Like, who lives here? Who lives here? Who is a citizen? That's going to be very, very slippery with Neptune in the fourth house. It's like, yeah, like who's living? Like, who are you? Where did you come from? Where are your papers? And this is Aries, right? This is not Neptune in Taurus, and people are living in small Edens, like out in the middle of the fig deserts in California, where everything's nice and sort of tropical and a lot like Egypt. It's not like that at all. There's something about this energy with Neptune coming into the fourth house that, and I've been looking at this transit for years. It's not like I just thought, hey, yeah, there's that cool Neptune Saturn conjunction. I have been thinking about this for years because the enormity of it, the heaviness of it, and I've showed you how Saturn works here. The whole idea is to deconstruct the nadir of the chart, the basement of the chart, and build a better, stronger foundation so that 14 years later you're able to reap the benefits from it. That is the transit of the personal chart. It's the same for the national chart, although we have seen, unfortunately, that this has been corrupted. So for years, I've been trying to figure out, like, how is this thing going to manifest? And I just kept getting heavy. Right now, I'm not saying that there aren't positive things that can come of this, and we'll talk about them. They may not be things that you want to hear, but I wouldn't be who I was unless I brought them to the table. So there's all this talk with Neptune. If you think about this, right? Neptune rules the 12th house. And one of the things about the 12th house that is almost always associated with it is prisons. And what have we been talking about for the last couple months? Well, you've got this alligator prison that they built in Florida, where if you try to get out, you got to navigate these alligators. You also have Trump and Alcatraz, right, which is about a $3 billion renovation. And what's interesting is that both of those prisons are connected to Neptune and water, right? So with the alligator prison, which got flooded, if you somehow manage to get out, well, you better learn how to ride an alligator, right? Or else you're lunch. But that's water, right? It's very Neptunian. But there's an aggressive element behind it. And in some ways, it's the same thing with Alcatraz. Again, it's a prison. It's Neptunian, surrounded by water. And I would say if they did it, I'm not sure they would, but if they did it, it would be like very military, like super military. You know, they have sharks out there in the bay, but they can't put them there because people do swim to Alcatraz and back, right? Like that happens all the time. So I'm not sure how they're going to, but you know what I'm saying? They're talking about these prisons, and the prisons are connected to water. Water, of course, is ruled by Neptune, large bodies of water, in the 12th house. So that's just part of the conversation. And we know that that's been going on. And the other part of the conversation is El Salvador and sending some of these hardened criminals to Bukele down in El Salvador, right? And so again, that's very Neptunian, fourth house, prison. Now, do we have anything that looks like they're going to get on a plane and fly there? No, not really. But with Neptune, the idea is that you don't need a lot of proof with Neptune. You don't need a lot of proof. What you need is you need a lot of public sentiment. So we've just been talking about Neptune and the Neptune transit of the fourth, and it's not only the structures that I'm talking about, but how people live, where they live, who they live with, can they afford to buy a home. Neptune in the fourth house is not for a nation is it's not a great transit. It is not a great transit in Aries. The first thing it's going to do, let's play a little game here, is it's going to start to square Venus and Jupiter and the sun. Now, of the three, the Venus Jupiter squares with Neptune are not good. They're not good at all. Venus Neptune squares are agreements that have been agreed upon, but they're not being honored, right? Somebody's being fucked over. Some group is not holding up their end of the agreement. And especially here with Venus in the seventh house. So that could be very much connected to like legalities, trials, are people going to agree with the courts? Like if you're a political figure, let's say you're Trump, are you going to agree with the courts with the Venus Neptune? Probably not, right? And I'm going to get into a little bit more of sort of Trumpist Pontiflexus. And again, I am not anti-Trump. I call these things to the best of my ability as I see them. So it could be Trump, it could be Biden, it could be, I don't care. Right? I'm just looking at the energy, I'm looking at the archetypes. Trump has shown recently far less willingness to listen to and follow judges. Now, you could say, well, he's doing that because they fucked him over. Or if you understood the philosophy of Curtis Yarvin basically is the Mandarin, right? He's like the Confucius of J.D. Vance. Basically, he says that a president should break away from the judicial system. And if he doesn't agree with their ruling, he does not have to follow and abide by it. So I'm just giving you another example of this Neptune square with Venus. But it's not just that. It's this can be very, very complicated. So one of the things we talk about or have been are migrants. To me, it's very Neptunian. You know, these are people that are displaced. They cross great bodies of water, right? They come in as victims of violence, of regime change, all those very Neptunian things. And it feels to me like we're in for a bit of a bait and switch here. We're in for a bit of a bait and switch. What starts off as, hey, we just want to get these undesirables out of the country, that changes. And the definition of an undesirable is now having a very, very different kind of label attached to it. So let's go back to Friday's show for a little bit. And I'm going to talk about how for basically 8 years, the whole DEI, systemic racism, purple hair crowd, all these people that made our lives living hell, right? For a number of reasons. They were rewarded. They were downstream from the takeover of the university system, which promulgates social Marxism, and they're a byproduct of it. And we're dealing with like the Robin DiAngelos of the world. And and not only that, but it's reached this level where you have this guy, this swimmer, what's his name? Thomas, for his first name. But he's a dude. He swims at Penn. He starts swimming for the women's team, and he smashes all their. So this is like this peak kind of blue hair resistance, and it metastasizes into Biden and Harris, and we watched that for 4 years, and we're embarrassed daily, right? We're embarrassed because we have a president who looks like he's taking a dump in his pants half the time, and we have this vice president who looks like she's, 3 glasses of Cabernet into her double Xanax lunch, right? And so this is what we're going through, this humiliation ritual, and people are pissed because there's nothing worse than having a version of reality that everybody knows is distorted, is an illusion, it's fucked up. And everybody who is outside of that sees that and is in agreement with it very easily. But then you have these gatekeepers who constantly insist that that reality is true. Their version of it, not yours. That everything that you see about what's happening is wrong. Biden is competent. Kamala Harris is a Shakespearean scholar. Right? Hunter is son of the year. I mean, this is what was going on during that time. It was huge, huge gaslighting. And then you have all the other stuff that starts to go down, right? You have like the chicken and wing sauce wars that are showing up on TikTok, and the Spirit airplane fights and all this, so people are watching this, right? Meanwhile, we're getting all these pictures, waves and waves and waves of immigrants. And we're getting stories about the cats and the dogs being eaten in Indianapolis or Indiana, Ohio, places like that. And so there's all this outrage, right? But there's this turning point that happens, and it's with Dylan Mulvaney. And when Dylan Mulvaney is the shark jump moment for that movement. He's the Fonzarelli, the Arthur Fonzarelli, who jumps over the shark during the ill-fated Happy Days episode. It's Dylan Mulvaney and him shilling for Bud Light. That is, it's not like Paul Revere, but it's kind of like that. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, we're not going to buy Bud Light anymore. Fuck that. And there's this massive boycott. And it is the beginning of the turning of the tide. It's the Dylan Mulvaney moment. And in fact, Dana White, the aptly named Dana White, does a deal with Bud Light. and it becomes the beer of UFC. He saves fucking Bud Light like it's a power move. Now, you can ask yourself, was that something that was done on purpose? Right? Did the marketing director of Bud Light, that Brazilian corporation, is she part of the plan? Or was she just a useless dupe that decided to create a model that fit the plan? I think it's more of the latter. Let's do a little visual here to give you kind of an idea of what I'm talking about. Let's see, what's his name? What's the guy's name? Brenton. Yes. Okay. So we get to this kind of weird peak, high strange. And I'll show you. No. Hold on. Let me remove this. All right, here we go. Right here. Okay, so this is Sam Brenton. Okay, this is the guy that was an American nuclear engineer, right? He was hired number 2 in command there in Washington, D.C. for the disposal of nuclear waste. Now, he may be a fucking genius, right? He may be the face of genius. But this is what was literally posing as leadership. This is what was going on. And have you seen his boyfriend? I don't know what happened to his boyfriend. But he used to bring his boyfriend around as a dog, like a dog in leather. So this is like this peak gaslighting. This is all gaslighting. Total gaslighting. And then we have what's her name? Rachel Levine. And who can forget Rachel Levine? And I mean, they're completely trolling us, right? How are we not being trolled here? We're going to look back on this period of history in America, and people are going to shake their heads. Look at that; they're together. This is insane, right? I mean, this is completely insane. This is the height of the madness. And I'm telling you that madness could not sustain itself. There's no way it could ever sustain itself. They did it with Dylan Mulvaney. They did it with these two. Sam Brenton used to, I guess still does, watch out for your luggage at an airport with him. There's no way any kind of corporate governmental entity could run itself for a significant period of time with people like that. Now, you may get by with a Mayorkas or two, or an Anthony, what's his name? You may get by with some of those people, and they can kind of steer the machine a little bit. But you get too many of the people that I just brought up, and not only do they infest the culture, but they're behind the scenes running. It'll fall down. It will fall apart. These people are not competent. Like, they may have a touch of genius in them or something, but they're, as humans, they're beyond dysfunctional. And I believe that a lot of that, now in the rearview mirror, that was all a setup. Now, astrologically, we get 15 years of Neptune and Pisces. So, we get 15 years of shit like this. Right? This is your Neptune and Pisces right here. I mean, literally, look. You got somebody playing dress up as a fucking naval commander, and not even a dude. So Neptune and Pisces has been all about, high strange. It's all been very, very weird, right? But not only has it been weird, but it's also been an assault on our senses. It's been an assault on our spirit. You could look around and you could look at those two and say, well, that's really satanic. Like, the devil has infiltrated the walls of Washington, D.C. You could easily make that case. So Neptune and Pisces, it kind of is this unlocking of Pandora's box. And all these characters just start to emerge. And a lot of them are not real. They're not real wholesome. In fact, they're kind of, I mean, look, Freaky's okay. I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody out there watching this show wants to get to know Sam Brinton, right? To each their own. But it went even beyond that, right? Like, when you start to get into things like the hip hop world, and you have these hip hop artists, little this, little that, little this, and they're all fucking dying, right? They're all having this sort of, like, Neptune and Pisces martyr trip. Plenty of new members of the 27 Club. Neptune and Pisces brings us fentanyl, and before that, OxyContin. It really, really fucked up our country in a lot of ways, right? And we haven't had to deal with Neptune and Pisces for quite a long time. But when it came, it was a tidal wave of high strange. And what it did to people that were not like that is it incensed them. And even Neptune and Pisces, as it relates to like migrants and people seeking shelter from the storm, right? We saw this wave during those last degrees of that happening under the Biden administration. And again, it's gaslighting people. It's pissing people off. And they see people like Sam Brinton. They see people like, this Cohen. And then they go back, and then there's all the lawfare against Trump. Trump is being persecuted here, is being persecuted there. There's Russia collusion. Like, all this stuff starts to create something, right? Like, there are still millions and millions of people in this country. We could have a global conversation, but in this country, there are still millions and millions of people who are extremely pissed about COVID, what happened, what they had to go through, what they're still having to go through, the people that they've lost. Like, that's a whole other layer. Again, Neptune and Pisces, that's part of this whole thing. And that's part of this kind of boiling, roiling cauldron that is cooking the American people. Because nothing has happened, right? Nothing truly of note has happened. There seems to be a lot of chess pieces or deck chairs being moved around with this subpoena or that subpoena. And who knows? Maybe something will come out with Obama and Russiagate or whatever. Trump needs to tread a little lightly there. But maybe something will come of this. And that people are finally going to get some degree of justice. Right? But who's the justice really for? Is it for them or is it for Donald Trump? You may say, well, it doesn't really matter because he's our president. No, it does matter. It actually does matter who the justice is for. So what I'm proposing here is that all the stuff that I've just showed you, right? The Dylan Mulvaney's, the story over the last 8 to 10 years. That's all been a bit of a setup. And again, with Neptune and Pisces, it's Pandora's box, right? It's the streets of Portland. It's the streets of Seattle. It's the streets of Oakland. It's all these things, right? It's like you get into the low octave of Pisces, you're at street fucking level, right? The only lower you get is subterranean. And that's, either living in a subway in New York or 6 feet under. So this is what we've been dealing with. And for you folks over in Europe, you have your own version of this. And I'm sorry to say, much more advanced in some ways. Right? You have your own bowl of fruits and nuts that are running the EU, but you've had this massive onslaught of Neptune and Pisces and all these people and all these victims and just do the Christian thing and it'll all be sorted out, right? So that's happened on your watch. We have our own version of this. And so now you've got a bunch of people, and I hear this, but I hear this. And the call is angry. It's very angry. And frankly, I don't blame people. Right? I don't blame that they're angry. They're angry over the fact that all this stuff happened during, quote unquote, Biden. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been happening for a long fucking time. This goes all the way back to Reagan. Once Reagan gave these people amnesty, it was like, let's open the border. And then you have Bush doing a whole other deal to allow X amount of people into the country per year. And it's really the Republicans that get this train rolling, right? And so by the time we get into Biden station, it's wide open. But it didn't start with Biden. It started a long time ago. And what do all these people have in common? They're all globalists. And there is such a thing as a globalist. They come from this school of internationalism, and they believe that the world can be guided and governed by one majority body, and that the one majority body would be an insurance for world peace. You're right. Everybody's under one currency, one set of rules and laws, right? One army. Think about that. One army. One army that could probably not be defeated. I mean, that's the idea of the internationalist accord, and that they would have some form of a semi-spiritual humanistic religion that would tie people together. But that's not where we are now. Where we are now is justice, right? Justice is coming to town. It is coming to town. And the masses want blood. That's what they want. They want blood. Let me see if I can go to the February posting here. Here, let's just go back here. Which is what we had before, right? So here's Neptune Saturn. Okay. How many people have been deported since round 2 with Trump? Let's ask. All right, here we go. Okay, so ICE, I'll share this with you. ICE has stated that they've deported 65,682 aliens in the first 100 days of Trump. That's their number. There's another number here, 72,000. Some are much higher. Like, I'm sure they'd want it to be closer to 253,000. But I'm guessing it's somewhere between this and that, right there. How many people came in 1 year of Biden? 1 year. What, 1 million? There's no way at this rate that they're going to go and retrieve 1 million people. This is 65,000 in 100 days. 200 days more, and you're up to, what, 120, 190,000? That's way, 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 way off course, right? And now Trump has done this deal where hotel owners, restaurant owners, and farmers, their people get to stick around. All right, so who are we deporting now? Okay, so there could be some MS-13 guys, the Venezuelan gangs. Have you heard anything about them lately? No. There's been a shift, okay? There's been a shift. It's not out of phase with another shift that we've seen with this whole Trump thing. So we went from this phase shift from Epstein and the videos and the files and everything that goes along with Epstein. And all of a sudden that didn't matter anymore. That wasn't important anymore. And if you believed in it, you were a sucker, right? And what was really important was Obama and Brennan and Peter Strzok and Russiagate and all this other stuff, right? That became this phase shift. Let's keep that in mind, right? That's a phase shift going from kind of one operation to another, and usually for the masses. This other phase shift now is different. And now ICE is being used instead of deporting, right? ICE is being used to clean up the streets. It's very, very different. And Trump has now said that he's going to banish the homeless, right? He's going to bring back asylums. Again, he talks a lot of shit, but these are all his words. He's going to, and he's using Washington, D.C. as a test ground. Now, the thing with ICE is that they have their own set of operating standards. They don't need warrants. ICE can just go in and snatch people and take them if they have some kind of requisite order or something like that. But you're probably not going to know that, right? And most people who have been going through, let's call it the blue hair psyop, they want justice, man. They want to see these people out of the fucking country, right? And frankly, I don't blame them. They've been getting government subsistence and a lot of perks and benefits that people who obviously have lived here for a long time are supporting them in order to have those things. So I don't blame them for being angry. I don't blame them for wanting a couple of pelts on the wall and say, yeah, go back to where you came from. But number one, it's not taking place with the same kind of urgency and alacrity that happened when they let him in. That's number one, right? And number two, they got other issues with quote unquote legal aliens that are way more pressing than sort of these phantoms that they're trying. I mean, this whole idea that they're trying to find these people, and especially if they have some kind of an offense, then send them off to El Salvador. And again, these people in Dearborn, right? They're theoretically Americans, but you basically have an outpost of Somalia in Dearborn. That in and of itself poses a completely different issue than these other people that they're running around trying to track down and get the hell out of the country so that people who are pissed off have something to be cheerful about, right? So look at Trump. He's really doing his job, right? And I'm telling you that whole thing with migration is a complete ruse. It is a complete ruse. And the reason why is because they're not going to be able to find these people. And even if they do, they now have handcuffs on them. They can't take people out who are making T-shirts for $5 an hour or $10 an hour or whatever they're making them, right? Like they can't do it. They may be able to get, some sketchy gang-related stuff out or money launderers out, but they've got handcuffs. They're not going to be able to do what they have purported to do. Now, why is ICE being ramped up, and why are these cities like DC, which is obviously a national city, why are they being patrolled, cleaned up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, I have a theory. And my theory is that this is a test case. Like, because they can do it, like Trump can do it because it's DC and they're part of DC, so they can do it pretty much whatever they want there. And Muriel Bowser, the mayor, can't really do squat. But ultimately, it is not for those people. All right, let's take a quick little divergence here. And we're going to shift the conversation in a more than likely not always agreeable direction. Okay. If you look at what's happened over the past week with Nick Fuentes, I guess 2 weeks ago, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes is starting to reach levels of popularity that very few people touch into. And he's only 26 years old. So we could have a whole discussion. Who is Nick Fuentes? Why is he here? Why does his message resonate? And ultimately, what is the end game? What's the end goal here? And once Elon Musk bought X, it opened up X to be kind of a light version of Gab. And the whole Groyper JQ movement started to really take hold. You know, you've got Dan Bilzerian talking to 40,000 people on Twitter, or you have Jackson Hinkle, or any number of young males, and they're usually males, who are speaking out against, in some cases, like Jackson Hinkle, Israel, Zionism, etc. And in the case of Bilzerian and Nick Fuentes, power, specifically Jewish power. And the thing that makes Fuentes so potent is that he does not have any, he doesn't have any bumpers in his bowling lane. And a lot of these other people have bumpers. So basically, Nick's rolling without bumpers, right? And he can say whatever he wants. And he is psychologically, I guess I would say spiritually, based on his own religion or whatever. He's a Catholic. He's reconciled on all these different levels so that when he says something, there's no cognitive dissonance. When you hear Nick Fuentes, what you're hearing is Nick Fuentes, to the best of his ability, speaking the truth, the things that he believes in. And he will say things that other people won't dare to say. And within the past week, he's been getting 500,000 people on his Rumble show. The worst thing that Tucker and Candace could have done would have been to converge on Nick Fuentes. Why is this important? Well, if you are the group of people that Nick Fuentes is railing about, and not just him, but literally thousands and thousands and thousands of these groypers, plus these new converts that are, you know, Candace and Tucker are like gateway drugs. And then once you get to Nick Fuentes, if you don't know some things about his private life, once you get to Nick Fuentes, you're like, oh man, what, you know, why wasn't I snorting this the whole time? Right? Like that's eventually what happens. And Masaki and I have been kind of going back on Nick Fuentes a little bit. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if apparently they slaughtered the red heifer. This is what I've heard. And that was going to be the consecration of the new temple, and it would bring the Moshiach into the world. Well, would it be ironic if Nick Fuentes was the Moshiach? I thought, well, that's ironic. Like, this is what you guys thought that you were bringing in your Messiah, but what you were bringing in was the person who would light the fire for the Tikkun Olam, right? Like, that would be really ironic. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. That's just kind of ironic. What's happening with Fuentes is that the profile of Americans who are more and more outspoken against either Israel, Zionism, AIPAC, and I would say disproportionate Jewish power, those numbers are growing tremendously. If you are a group that's invested in maintaining that power, what do you want to do? Well, you can't tell them to shut up now. No, what you want to do is you want people like Alex Karp and Peter Thiel and the Palantir boys to get as much information on people as possible, right? Even if there is a slight hint of somebody being a part of that dialogue and questioning, who runs the halls of power. That stuff that's all palantired out, right? It's all palantired out. They know who everybody is. They know where everybody lives. They've figured out like their next 7 moves. Seriously. That's how powerful Palantir is. Once October 7th happened, Alex Karp and Peter Thiel did a deal with Bibi Netanyahu and what was going on in Gaza. And they said, let's use Palantir to track these people. So they're literally using this, whatever you call it, slaughter in Gaza to R&D this technology. And what's going to happen when they really get this technology fine-tuned? Well, they bring it here, right? And now you have ICE, who all of a sudden have phase shifted from, hey, we've done as much as we can, but we'll every now and then we'll do kind of something to show you that we're doing our ICE work. But what they're really interested in now is getting people in line, right? They don't want people on the streets. You know what that means? They don't want people living in van life. I'm not sure they want a lot of people living on homesteads. I feel like this is Neptune and Saturn coming right into that 4th house of the US. This is the heavy hand. This is the boot, right? The boot that's coming. The 4th house is the home, and Saturn is all about authority. Now, again, we've seen it there before, but not with Neptune. Neptune is deceptive. They'll tell you everything you want to hear, but they'll do everything you don't want them to do. And you'll say, well, they're doing this because it has to change. It's about time somebody came along and had some cojones. Well, what happens if one of these days one of your favorite bloggers just doesn't show up, or one of your favorite YouTube people just doesn't show up on YouTube anymore? What happened to them? Well, we found that there was some hateful language that was being used in some of these broadcasts, and we can't have that. We have to have order in our society, and that means everybody has to be treated fairly, right? Which is the opposite of that Libra on the midheaven. I'm telling you, we are entering into a very dangerous time. It is precipitously dangerous. And it's because there are people who, for a period of time, will want any form of justice that they believe is needed to show those fucking Democrats, to show those fucking liberals, right, who the boss is, to have this moment of like, oh yeah, you had your day. How's it feel now, motherfucker? Right? Like, there are people who are they're going to live for that. And you'll get some of that, but that's not what this is about. What this is, those people are minor role players. They played their role, right? They got everybody gassed up. They got everybody believing that they're this significant threat to society. And for a period of time, it looked like they might have been, right? Particularly if you kind of brought in the European element. But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, Whit is sending me something. What's he saying here? Female British cops are jogging to solicit catcalls and arrest some of the men who hit on them. Were the men British men, or were they migrant men? Let's see. Well, they're not telling you, are they? They're certainly not telling you. Let me see the video. Hold on. I don't need your cream. I don't need your beauty cream. I don't need your beauty cream. It looks like you here. She needs the beauty cream more than I do. So what's going to happen here is that let me see if I get my train of thought back. With Neptune and Aries, there's going to be a major deception about who is a desirable, who's an undesirable. Like, there's a video where this guy was, I think he was a lawyer in DC. This happened the other day. And he had a Subway sandwich, and he threw it at one of these guys who's walking through the streets of Washington, DC. Well, first of all, you shouldn't throw your fucking Subway sandwich at the guy. No matter how shitty a Subway sandwich is. Probably somebody starving somewhere would eat that damn thing. But this cop turns around and puts the cuffs on him and arrests him, right? And that's for a Subway sandwich. I wonder what would have happened if the dude would have been black. That might have been a whole different story. But they're going to start to use a number of different justifications with Neptune to displace people, move people off their. And I know it's like We've been saying this for years, right? And oh yeah, they've got the trains set up and all this bullshit, right? We've been saying this for years, but Neptune has not gone through that 8th house since when? The fucking Civil War. And what happened during the Civil War? There was a lot of people that got displaced and moved off their properties. There was a lot of snatching of farms and plantations. Like, there was a lot of shit that went down during the Civil War with Neptune going through the 4th house. And the reasoning behind it never made sense. I mean, on one level it did, but on another level it didn't. It was just a justification for a number of different things to happen. I mean, there are quote after quote by Lincoln where he doesn't really give a shit about the slaves. Right? It's sort of like, yeah, they're part of the deal, but they are not the deal. So this is not the same, but it's very, very similar. Right? And it is that Civil War energy. But what is the Civil War going to look like now, if there is going to be one? I don't think it's black and white, although it was certainly trending that way. But it feels a lot more like language. So if you say, oh, well, this person over here, like for instance, okay, I'll give you an example. One of Netanyahu's right-hand people just got arrested in Vegas for like child porn shit, right? I'll show you. Netanyahu News. Let me see. Las Vegas. You gotta dive for some of this stuff because the mainstream media will. Yeah. Right here. I'll show this to you guys. Netanyahu associate arrested in Las Vegas. Child sexting. Escapes without charges. Goes back to Israel. An Israeli cyber official who works directly under Benjamin Netanyahu escaped to the occupied territories after his arrest in a U.S. child sex operation in Nevada, U.S. How does he get out? Las Vegas police, working with the FBI, Homeland Security, Nevada's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, announced on Wednesday the arrest of 8 men, including Tom Artyom Alexandrovich. He's 38, serves as the acting head of data and AI at Israel's so-called National Cyber Directorate. Meet Alan Dershowitz, a pedophile who may defend Israeli genocide at ICG. They said that. I didn't. So this is happening, right? This is all happening now, and people are starting to notice this shit. And it's like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, these people are supposed to be engaged in cybersecurity, and what they're doing is they're running child porn and child trafficking, right? So what does that do? It makes more people want to talk, right? It makes more people want to say, look at this. You see what's going on over here? And if you're the people that are running these cyber surveillance companies and all the other infrastructure, do you want that conversation to happen? Do you want more of these things to come out? No. So are you going to adjust your behavior? More than likely not. But what you'll do is you'll go after the people that are talking about it. And with Neptune and Aries, the amount of justification is mind-blowing. You could go down the religious path, right? And I'll stumble on that path for an hour or two on Twitter. All I got to do is go through Juanita Broderick or David Rodriguez's feeds, and they're talking about Trump and Jesus and Israel, and it's like, what is going on here? Like, this is high Neptune in Aries, and there's no, like, if Neptune in Pisces was anything goes, right? Let's get the bald-headed guy with the mustache and the pumps and make him number 2 at the NEA, and he's also a kleptomaniac. If anything goes with that in that regard, Neptune and Aries is going to be way different. Way, way, way different. There's going to be huge amounts of justification for initiating social change. And a lot of people are going to want it. They're going to want it because they're hungry for it. They've been in the desert for 20 years plus with no arrests, no convictions, no trials, nothing. And so they've been primed. They've been primed. And the whole blue hair thing, could it have gone completely like crazy blue hair globally? Not really. Those people are not competent. These people, they may be ruthless, they may be complete and utter sociopaths, but a lot of them are very competent. They know exactly what they're doing, right? So we have that coming with Neptune, and there's also this kind of religious overtone that goes along with it. It feels like, in as much as, there were people waiting for the migrants to come to give them their Jesus hug, right? Neptune and Aries feels satanic. It has this satanic vibe to it, right? Even if it's cloaked in some kind of fundamentalist sort of frock, it feels dark. It feels like it's preying upon people's need for something very biblical in an Old Testament way. When I think of Aries, I think of like the slaughter of the ram. And to me, that's very Old Testament-y. And that's just Neptune coming through, right? And it's just starting now. And there's going to be this wave of justification. And there are going to be people, and you can tell them right to their face, right? If you go down this path and you allow these people to do what they're doing without any kind of real due process, at a certain point, they'll be knocking on your door. And you think that they'll buy that straight? Well, I have nothing to hide. I go to church every Sunday. I tithe to Israel or whomever, right? Well, it's only a matter of time. And remember, they are building Palantir. They're building this massive, massive, massive cyber, right? This massive cyber network right beneath your feet as we speak. They're going to start to build these small nuclear power plants to power these AI centers that are being worked on right now, thanks to Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, and your boys at Palantir. That's all happening right now. And that is the neural network. That is the eye in the sky. That is the big brother, middle brother, little brother. That's it. Right there. And they're putting the pieces in place so that when and if they need that information, whomever, wherever you are, they have it, right? If they move into some kind of a social credit system, which is highly likely, by the way, they'll have all of that. They'll see your tweets. They'll see how much you spend on gasoline. Larry Ellison wants to be able to read the shit out of your toilet. I kid you not. It's a little weird, right? It's a little weird, but that's how granular they want to know every single thing about you. They basically want to play God. They want to be the all-seeing eye. In Neptune and Aries, again, fourth house, we can put it anywhere in the world, but in the fourth house of the US, Neptune and Aries gives them all kinds of justification. I mean, that's the key to Neptune, isn't it? You just justify just about anything with Neptune. And in Aries, boy, that's total command control right there. Okay. Let's bring in some of the religious side of this. I talked a little bit about it. There are people who are going to see what's happening at a street level as God's work. And they will bless it so, oh, that's God's work. Simple, get their head cracked open. Right? Well, boy. It's like, yeah, Jesus put a good one on them, right? And I am not anti-Christian, by the way. I'm just giving you a play-by-play of certain people who are more eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, versus turn the other cheek. And sometimes turning the other cheek isn't always the best thing to do, right? But this Neptune movement into Aries in the U.S. fourth house, it feels very, very militaristic. Very militaristic. But it's militaristic hidden behind a shroud of some kind of religious absolutism. Right beyond a shadow of a doubt. Then let's bring in Saturn, because we haven't talked about Saturn. Oh, Saturn's coming in too. Right? By the way, do you know who the new head of the World Economic Forum is? By any chance? I'll show you. Here's your new guy at the World Economic. Get out of there. Come on. Here you go. Right here. You go from Klaus Schwab to Larry Fink. Oh, and there's Andre Hoffman. Yeah. He's a co-chair. Larry Fink is the new head of the World Economic Forum. And that means BlackRock is running the WEF. Why is this important? Well, if you go back to our little chart over here, I'll show you why. Let's see. Where do we go from here? Give me 1 second. What has BlackRock been doing? What hasn't it been doing? That's probably the better answer. BlackRock has been buying huge chunks of real estate, personal real estate, homes, places that people live, right? Let's do this. So if you have Larry Fink, who's the head of BlackRock, who's now the head of the World Economic Forum, what do you think BlackRock's vision of the world is? It's to own every single fucking property that's ownable, right? So we go back here. Yeah, let's do this. There's Neptune, there's Saturn. So again, this is the US chart. And it feels a lot like you're going to live where we're going to tell you to live. The next 3 years in this country are going to be a real motherfucker, but in a way that you will not be used to, because you're going to have some people who will be down with the program. They're going to love it. They're going to love it. And there are going to be other people. And if you don't love it, you're going to be cast out. You'll be a liberal, or you'll be a commie, or a Democrat, or a panican, or whatever. Right? But with this chart and Neptune Saturn here, this is a complete reshaping of the country for the next 15 years. How people live, where people live. It feels in a lot of ways very militarized. It feels much more regimented in a lot of ways. It almost has this kind of cultural revolution vibe, but here in this country, right? And the whole idea, again, is to convince people that this is not only for their betterment, but it helps them make sure that the chaos of the future, the chaos that they had experienced over the last 10 years, never returns. That's the plan. And there are people that want that. There are people that will want that kind of security. They're going to want it at any cost. They will beg for it. Absolutely beg for it. And the first transits here, the Saturn Venus square, that's a tough transit. I mean, I don't think it's bad. They can be solid transits, but I wouldn't be looking to become a real estate mogul unless you have a lot of fuck you money and you're good friends with Larry Fink. So we have Neptune squaring Venus. Those are agreements that are not honored. Those are judgments that are suspended, or judgments that are rendered null and void by one party, not both. These are all about expectations that don't fit, right? And Saturn is the one planet that is really getting this work over here. You know, and this is really kind of the heart and soul of America. Venus, Jupiter, Sun, you know, Trump's planets are in here too. So Saturn's going to start to work Trump over. And if you think that Trump was callous during the Epstein thing, you haven't seen anything yet. You've not seen anything yet with Saturn squaring off against those Cancerian planets that Trump has. He will be short-tempered. He will be peevish. He will not have any patience for anyone. Period. End of story. So we're just moving into a phase now where the things that we thought we could count on, we're not going to be able to count on them. That's going to be Neptune. the Saturn transits are going to be kind of like you're on your own. If you're somebody that lives in, again, this is not maybe next week or next month, but a year from now, year and a half from now, 2 years from now, you don't know like how the money from this big, beautiful bill, whatever happens after it, where it goes. But there's going to be a cutback on rural services. I'm telling you that right now. So you're going to be on your own. They do not want liberty of movement. They want people living in cordoned off sort of Neptunian spaces, right? With Saturn right there, which is the oversight, right? Saturn is the watchtower looking down. You know, Sam Walton, before he became Sam Walton in the Walton world, he worked for the United States Army, and he basically ran all the Japanese internment camps in California. So the acquisition of products and all the things that go along with creating kind of a Walmart-like experience, he cut his teeth on because he had government-sponsored customers, right? So I'm just bringing that up because Walmart's one of these places where they've sort of been the outpost for acquiring things in areas that are kind of rural. And I just wonder how many of these Walmarts are still going to be around. We're also seeing Trump bring back these asylums, right? Neptune, fourth house. That's asylum territory. So what I'm trying to bring to the table here, just to kind of wrap it, all that stuff with the blue hairs and the Bidens and Sideshow Bob and all that shit, right? Peppermint Patty, that was all part of a psyop. It was all part of a psyop. It could never have ever sustained itself. Period. End of story. The ultimate goal of all of that was to get people riled up, pissed off, and never, ever want to have to deal with anything like that again. And the person that comes along and promises them that will never have to happen, that person will have a very important role in their life. And I feel like this is where this is going. So what you want to do is you just want to keep your eye on what's happening with ICE, what's happening with this whole idea to clean up America's cities. I don't have a problem with that. What are you going to do with these people? What's your plan? Oh, we're gonna put them on these work farms. Well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's like, aren't they putting the cart before the horse a little bit? And I kind of get where Trump is coming from. You know, like Washington, D.C. is his city. And if it's dirty, if it's crime ridden, if there are kids out after curfew, how does that look upon the city and these other people from other parts of the world that, come to the city that represents this country or this district? It doesn't bode well. So I get it, right? But this is just a test run. They're going to test run this thing. And there are going to be people that are like that guy that got arrested for throwing the hot dog. I guarantee you there are people that are standing up clapping because that radical, that man throwing the hot dog is never going to do that again. He's in big trouble. Really big trouble. All right. Now, I did say that out of this, something good can occur, which I do believe, although it's going to be hard with Neptune and Saturn going to the fourth house. So we have to look to the outer planets, the other outer planets. Pluto and Aquarius and then, of course, Uranus and Pisces. One of my concerns about Uranus and Pisces, as the U.S. will go through its Uranus return next year, yet another one, is that ICE will be augmented by some form of either drones, robots, or robotic drones. And those entities are not going to be able to be reasoned with very well. Right? It's almost like Judge Dredd territory. But I do feel like humans, so it's a matter of time. Like, can the people who are salivating for justice, salivating for that bitch who was in her Tesla, calling these guys to let them know ICE was coming, right? Like, at what point is enough enough? Is it based on Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Peter Strzok? Is that what people want? What about Tony Fauci? We don't talk about Tony Fauci anymore, do we? And if that's what people want, I don't have a problem with that. Right? Even if I do think that Jeffrey Epstein played a major role in the amount of corruption, money, you name it, lots of shit, right? If they were somehow to get Clapper and Brennan and Obama, if somehow, and I don't think it's going to happen, I think it could be enough for the people. I don't know if it's going to be enough for the people unless they get something like that. If they get some random woman in her Tesla alerting people that ICE are coming, it might feel good in the moment, or they see the guy throwing the Subway sandwich get arrested, it might feel good in the moment. But unless they get a Moby Dick, I don't think it's going to be enough. And so you have this slow roll of these kind of like, minor street justices that take place. And it's enough for people to say, oh, we're winning. But then at a certain point, it begins to change and begins to morph. And now the people that are being addressed, picked up, removed, they're not the people that are throwing the Subway sandwich. They're not the people that are calling ICE. They're the people that are saying things that are making people in positions of power very uncomfortable. And that's what this is ultimately, what I think this is about. And if you could even put Nick Fuentes in the mix, and let's say Nick Fuentes is honorable, right? Like, he's honorable. He has a mission. He's not perfect, but his mission is to wake up a bunch of young guys, groypers, who can see how their worlds have been manipulated and also given short shrift, because there are people who are in certain communities who will support the growth of a business based on what that community needs. And if it doesn't need them, then they're not going to be a part of that. So I think that Fuentes doing this is not a bad thing at all. I think it's actually a good thing. But then again, what's happening is that you're getting all this information. All these people are posting on Twitter. All these people are posting on IG. All these people are posting on TikTok. TikTok has a new head of like thought police who used to fight in the IDF, right? Do you see where this is going? So now all of a sudden they're compiling huge amounts of data on not just Nick Fuentes, but the thousands and thousands of followers that he's getting. And it's like, oh, well, we didn't know this person had such antipathetic feelings towards Israel. Oh, we do now, right? So this is where Palantir comes in, Alex Karp, and they just start to profile, and they profile, and they profile, and they profile, right? And then if you wanted to get rid of your staunchest critics, that's what you would do. And you would somehow continue to frame the conversation that it's not just hate speech, but even a hate crime, right? Like, so let's say you liked somebody's tweet. Let's say you liked Nick Fuentes' tweet. That wouldn't be hate speech. But if you liked the tweet or you reposted it, that'd be a hate crime. Because you're forwarding an idea, right? That's a crime. You didn't say it, but you're for. So we're headed towards a very, very slippery slope here. Now, again, with the outer planets, I feel like there's enough native rebellion kind of in the air that I'm not sure they're going to be able to pull this off. But they're going to try, I'm telling you right now. And they've got enough people gassed up so that they will consent to some form of either servitude or incarceration or even sharing information about people that should be, thoroughly private. It's like the Red Army. When you go back and you look at the Russians, the Russians had the Cheka, and the Cheka were heavy, right? They were like one of the first sort of intelligence, counterintelligence units because they needed to deal with the Bolsheviks. So, we see the Cheka become huge. And it feels to me like this is part of the story. The other part of the story is how important is it for you to be able to live the way you want to live? You want to live in a homestead, or you want to have your van life, or which Trump is not into, by the way. How important is it? Well, I'll tell you right now, Saturn would make it really damn important. And I think we're going to have a major population shift here. It'll be a tidal population shift. And I see it as getting people out of the rural areas and into more suburban and urban areas. These 15-minute cities, whatever, right? I can see this. But usually it'll be triggered by some kind of catastrophe or fear. And I feel like it's the resource thing. Like they're just going to start to shut down resources in semi-rural areas. So if you're in your, 60s and you want to go to a hospital, and I do know this is the fact with some of the BBB stuff, some of these rural hospitals can be put out of business. And you'll have to live within, 15 miles of Houston, 20 miles of Houston to get to a hospital. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like this is very Neptune in the fourth house, right? It kind of weakens the system in a lot of ways. And these squares with Neptune, Saturn, to Venus, Jupiter. So these are not great squares. Now, the Neptune true node trine, that'll be good. I mean, if you want to fight for your right to live where you want to live, I could see that being the Civil War. There's a lot of heavy duty black white stuff going on when Neptune went into Aries. I feel like this is different now. I feel like the Civil War, if there's going to be one, is your right to live where you want to live. That's what I'm seeing. So it's going to be an interesting 3 years. You're going to see the next 3 years, this country is going to be deconstructed. It is going to be deconstructed. And a lot of the things that we have counted on in terms of institutions, and I would say reasonable institutions, they're going to be deconstructed as well. Because again, the whole idea is that 28 years from now or 14 years from now, there's a new beginning. Now, this is where we set off into a completely new territory. Okay. I talked a little bit about the third turning, and we've been in the fourth turning. We are in the winter of the fourth turning right now. And 14 years from now, we will be in, guess what? The first turning, right? The spring, the new spring, 14 years from now. And what happens 14 and a half years from now is going to be very undefinable. This is not going to be like any other 14-year cycle, particularly with Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini and these transits that are going to go bonkers, man. Wait till Uranus goes into Cancer. The natives are restless. I'll tell you that right now. The natives are totally restless. So I just wanted to connect up the dots from Friday's show so that you could at least see this astrologically and how Neptune is all about sort of like delusion, mass psychosis, and especially in Aries, there's kind of a messianism. I'm not going to say that Nick Fuentes is Hitler, but he has a very Hitlerian vibe, right? Like Hitler really inspired people, and we have Neptune and Aries, and we're into that kind of very deceptive Aryan territory. So it'll be very, very, very interesting. Unless something happens to Fuentes, people are going to continue to talk about him. That's about all I have. But I was really trying to get across this idea of this Neptune transit of the fourth and how it's not a really good transit. And that ultimately, if you want to literally fight for your land, fight for your rights, not lay down, because Neptune's laying down, you want to tap into that true node in Leo, then this could be a time where the breakdown, which the breakdown is going to happen regardless. But the breakdown could go in the people's favor. And that a lot of these structures that have been built, and I'm not even talking about physical structures, I'm talking about like social structures, HOAs, shit like that. They just go away. Like they're not important. Because Saturn gets us to think about what's important. So what's it going to be 14 and a half years from now? Is it going to be our time? their time, maybe all of our time together. We're just embarking on this journey now. The journey resolves itself in 14 and a half years. It's a new America. It's a new world. It's a new time. It's the first turning. And we're back. We're back with something new. But until now and then, it's going to be very, very interesting with Neptune going through the fourth house and Saturn right behind it. Okay. I think ultimately we went out, because Neptune is also the domain of lies. And when you see something like that, right? Like here you have Netanyahu, who's supposed to be this moral vanguard for what's taking place over in Gaza, and his number two dude just gets busted for child porn on some kind of Israeli cybersecurity network. People are paying attention to this. This is the best laid plans. They don't always go according to plan. So I think ultimately we'll be successful, because these people can't help themselves. They are driven and consumed by the Lord of Lies. And they'll always get found out. Now, what we do with it, that's a whole other story. You can find that story. I just showed it to you. Oh, it's only one guy. He's a bad apple. He's a bad apple. That guy was he was large and in charge. He was running that conference. How does he escape? That's the part I'm interested in. How does he escape? Oh, excuse me. Would you mind if I use the bathroom? Oh, sure. No problem. Oh, by the way, the window's open. All you got to do is just climb through it. Thank you for letting me use the bathroom. I'm just telling you, not everything is as it seems or will be. And just when you think, this is going to be the weird part, just when you think you have somebody that you can count on and they're on your side, beware. Now, I'm not saying this so you're paranoid with all your friends. And if there's somebody that you are uncomfortable with, or you may not completely trust their motives, I'm not saying to not listen to that, but you're going to run across some of those people who will be very important. And this is sort of the realm of inversion that we're in, right? So it'll certainly make things interesting. God loves a good puzzle to solve. And I bet you do too. All right, we did it. 3 hours of Sunday night AstroLive. I hope you found what I was talking about helpful, and that you are understanding this concept that I'm talking about, which is this creation of kind of this pre-crime Philip K. Dickian force that is there initially to restore the balance of migration, but metastasizes into something very, very different. And it's this Saturn Neptune going through the fourth house. It's very Romanesque. It's very militaristic in a lot of ways. And it also has a little bit of like onward Christian soldier. There's this nationalism And not all nationalism is bad. Not all nationalism is good. But that's going to kind of creep into this thing as well. And some of you might say, oh man, I'm all for it. Well, tell them you're an astrologer and see what happens. Let's see how they feel about that on a nationalistic scale of 1 to 10. All right. I'll be back here on Tuesday with the Astro Weather. Thanks for hanging in here with me tonight as I blew out a power cord on my computer and I had to like kind of re-rig this thing. So, of course, don't forget our sponsor, True Hemp Science. I have been having a little bit of True Hemp Science tonight throughout the show. It's been really good. All you got to do is spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS, and you will get what you need plus the goodies and more. Ooh, look what I have here. Look at this. This comes in the old goodie section here. These are Starlight goodies right there. 2 gummies per pack. And you will not be disappointed. I'll tell you that right now. So you'll get that, maybe a couple other things in your order, and you'll be happy that you did. $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always, always, always a 30-day money-back guarantee. I am still in the business of doing readings for people. So avail yourself of those services from me. And for those of you who have ordered readings, I will get back to you. I've been a little under the weather, but now we're back in fighting for them and taking on the schedule. All right, that's it. I mean this with all sincerity. Please, please, please take the very best care of yourself that you can. You know what that is. Get a little exercise every day. Get some sunshine every day. Get some good fresh water, some good fresh food, clean food. Get outside. Have a conversation with another person or two, right? And just do that. Just do a little of that every day. Stay grounded. Keep in shape. That's really vitally important. I know sleeping is difficult, but hey, you get some sleep gummies from our buddy Chris. And, treat each other well. That's the other part of it. Sometimes we lose sight of that. And we don't treat each other well enough because we don't treat ourselves well enough. You do the 2 things, they're symbiotic. It's a win-win for everyone. All right. Love you all. Take care. God bless. Bye for now.